Well, hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Gonzo Ewok channel for another podcast where we're going to talk crap about some crap.
Yep. This is the second one we've done now, and that's another shit introduction. We really need to plan the introductions for these things.
We don't plan, that's part of our charm. No planning, no scripting. I say no planning, we do have a couple of topics that we want to touch on today. But we'll do a quick introduction first, in case you've never seen us before. My name's Ewok.
And my name's Gonzo, and if you're new to the podcast, thank you very much for listening. We hope you hang around for more than 15 seconds. Which would be more than a lot of viewers do.
That implies that we have a lot of viewers.
No.
Or listeners, in the case of
the 15 or 20 or so that we have regulars will love dearly.
We do, we love you all. That you just made it even worse. Let's just kick off. First thing we're going to talk about is a big issue. It's been kicking off all over the Steam forums, and that is the concept of paid-for mods.
Yeah.
Specifically, Skyrim introduced paid-for mods. There's been a few developments in the last couple of days, so we're already probably going to be a little bit out of touch by the time we get this out. Which will be in a couple of days' time. But hey ho, let's get some opinions rolling. What do you think of the idea of paid for mods?
It's an interesting one. At first, I didn't quite know what was happening. There was a Steam update. When was it? Last Thursday, last Friday, or what have you. Steam needed to restart to update itself, as it does like 5 times a day. It seems like restarted it, and then on the store page there was a thing saying, "Oh, and you bringing your mods in an entirely new way." And a picture of Skyrim. And to be honest, it just kind of washed over us. I just thought it's right, fair enough. Not
I missed
really
the build-up as well. I missed the build-up, and I didn't catch it until the Fallout.
Aye. I think it's a weird one, and the reason why I say like it just kind of washed over us isn't because I haven't got opinions on it. The more I've kind of thought about it, and the more I've kind of looked into it, I do, and we'll get to them. But it's just the fact that I actually don't use mods myself very much. I think I've maybe put a couple of mods on Skyrim, but very minor things, which added some ambient sounds, some ambient noises.
No, I'm the same. I'm definitely the same on that. I've got quite a few mods on Skyrim, but they're generally sort of environmental tweaks. So I've got better skies, better water, enhanced textures.
Aye.
I've got the ambient sounds as well, better dungeons, stuff like that. Stuff that doesn't really change the core gameplay.
Yeah, I'm not adding new maps. I'm not adding items.
Basically, I'm making my Skyrim experience a bit more up to date by making it a bit flashy. You know,
Aye.
The PC that I've got is more than capable of running Skyrim on the highest setting. So I thought, why not push it a little bit further and make my game as pretty as possible.
It's exactly what I did with the PC that I'm out in the world. I had Skyrim and I was playing it on the old machine. Got the new one, it's super powered, and I thought, right, let's see if I can find some stuff that's quite demanding and put it on, see what I can do. So, I mean, getting to the point of it all, the idea of Steam bringing in paid mods, there's a couple of issues that kind of come out of it the way that I see. One, as a starting point, actually, if I remember to do this, I'll drop the link in the description for the video, or at least I'll put a comment on. There's a guy called THFE Productions. He's predominantly a Total War player, a guy called Oakley. He does some videos. He's a small channel, way bigger than us, but he's still a very small channel. But he plays predominantly Total War games. And I think coming from that background where he plays almost exclusively Total War games, I think kind of like coloured his views to some extent. He put up a video where he kind of like shared his opinions, and he'd put together kind of a little joke parody video, which I'll link to, as I was saying, which raised a couple of interesting points. Coming from that background of Total War, though, it's the idea that, and the point that he kind of raised, and I thought, you know what, it's an interesting one. If paid mods are a thing, in theory, a developer could release a game like Total War Rome 2, where the game arguably is being rushed, but being given developers the benefit of the doubt, it's been brought out, and there's things that are controversial, or there's design decisions that have been made, or there's features in the game that aren't quite as fleshed out as you'd expect them to be with a release, and then mods come along which fix them, that the community have put together and made. Could you envision a situation where a developer pushes a game out the door and says, well, we'll get our 40 quid for that game, and we'll let the mod community fix it, and then, surprise, surprise, Steam and the developer get 75% of the cash from the mod. So it's 25p in the pound goes into the mod's pocket. The rest of the cash is going to the developer who didn't finish the game.
So in a way, you're kind of envisaging a situation where you're not really paying for a mod, you're paying for a patch or a fix.
Yeah, like we complained in the last podcast about Mortal Kombat and saying, well, arguably people have taken stuff out of the game and then sold it back to you, even though you've paid for the full game.
But not only that, you're paying a large chunk. And what you said there is a very good point, that in the Skyrim model, 75% of the money was divvied up between Valve, who host the mod,
And Bethesda.
who made the game, with only 25% going into the modder's pocket.
Yeah.
Which isn't really a great split. I can definitely appreciate that you'd want a good chunk of it as the developer, because it's your game.
Yeah.
And the modders are building on your game's back.
Yeah, makes sense, yeah.
But Steam just hosting it and taking more than the person who's done the work, that sticks in my craw a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, I suppose, I'd never really thought that you might be paying for patches, and that's very true.
I'm not saying that I think that's... I'd like to not be that
Fallout,
cynical.
Skyrim, Morrowind, all the Bethesda's games, because they're so grand in scope, do have their bugs and issues. And every single one of them has an unofficial patch fix, which is created by modders and is designed to plug those gaps and plug those holes.
Yeah.
And you're right, they could charge for them under the new model.
Yeah.
And do I really want to pay to fix a game that I've already paid to buy?
Yeah. And where does the line come between the modders who finish it and the developers who don't quite push it out? And don't get us wrong, I don't think I'm that cynical to think that, say, somebody like Creative Assembly, if they were going to push out Total War, would push it out and leave bits out so modders could then do it and they would get, some portion of that 75% that would come back to them. But I'm not saying that potentially that might not be a thing. I think I can't envision that it would happen, but I'm not saying that I know the inside minds and workings of developers, and let's be honest, there's some fairly unscrupulous developers out there, It's not all just big people who've got a big reputation that they want to try and maintain.
And not necessarily unscrupulous. There's a lot of indie developers who make games and eventually run out of money.
Right.
And they don't intend to, but they end up with a game that isn't as good as it could be. And again, you could find yourself in the position where you're paying more money for somebody else to step in and fix the game.
Aye.
And I suppose another point, we play a lot of Kerbal Space Program.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to tarnish Squad with this whole controversy, because Squad have already said they're not putting mods on the Steam Workshop, period. So the fact that there's paid mods on the Steam Workshop...
originally I think it was planned, and then there was a furore when they said, no, we're actually going to use like an external system, and actually that's probably going to work out for the best.
Well, there's limitations to Steam Workshop that unfortunately prevent good Kerbal mods from going on there, not least with some of the file types that they allow and the way that the game is actually built.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that you could be paying for patches. I think with a game like Kerbal, and this is just an example of a game like this, Squad have been really good in that people have come out with mods that introduce new things to the game. So Aerodynamics was a mod, the B9 Aerospace parts was a mod created by modders, given to the community, and the developers liked them so much that they incorporated those aspects into their games. I say like them so much, a lot of them, like Aerodynamics, was planned all along.
You could argue the same with Project Zomboid. There's some elements have been fan-created or made by members of the community, and then they've been given credit and brought on board to help develop those ideas.
You could find yourself in a similar position, not with a patch, but say the B9 Aerospace mod was paid for. Imagine I could have spent £5 getting Aerodynamics and getting new parts and stuff like that, and then they become part of the main game, and I've paid for something that then is given everybody else for free, or the game might update and render that mod obsolete, and that mod doesn't work with the game anymore.
That might be a source of income that you've got coming in as a
and the modder's not around anymore to update his product, and again, that's my money just gone. So that's money gone either because the game moves on and the mod becomes incompatible, or becomes sort of obsolete because the features become part of the game.
That's another really big issue, because then the argument becomes who's actually going to police this thing. Because, I mean, let's be honest, we've seen instances where games have came out, people have went on to Nexus forums, they've went elsewhere, they've grabbed a mod, they've threw it up there and they've said, I made this, I want paying for it. And it's since transpired they hadn't paid for it, they hadn't made it. But
even if they hadn't made it,
for it.
Oh, sorry, even if they had made it, mods are sort of very incestuous. People borrow bits from other people's mods and tweak them. They take bits of code and assets from here, there, and everywhere.
A lot of them you get with Skyrim. It might be like a compilation pack where somebody said, you know what, I've got almost like a playlist of 10 mods that I think make the game really cool, and I've put them together. You haven't created them, you've just curated those things together and put them together as one download.
And where you're in an environment where these things are free and there's less issues surrounding copyright and profitability, that's less of an issue. There have already been cases of mods that got reported and got taken down because they were copying other people's code or other people's content. Even just a small bit of it in a larger mod, it brings that issue. And again, that's people who've paid for that, and the initial modder has lost out on income, and the subsequent modder got income that perhaps they don't deserve. But more importantly, you as the consumer have spent money on a product that then gets withdrawn. Now, you've still got that product, but it's never going to be updated, it's never going to be maintained. Your money's gone, it's dust.
You've pissed up the wall.
My main issue with this whole thing, and you know what, I think it's fine if modders do want to get paid and they go about it the right way, but my main issue is that modding has always been an integral part of PC gaming.
Yeah, and it's usually a labour of love. It's a huge fan of a particular game, and they make the mod primarily because it's something they want in the game for themselves.
And I said I've only had sort of the visual and environmental mods on Skyrim. There's other games I've gone further into. Like I got the Florist mod for Mountain Blade 2. I got some various multiplayer mods and things like that, and really good, really great. But it's always been an integral part of PC gaming, and it's been a community and a system that's been ran and managed very naturally by the modders and the players themselves. It's developed naturally by the people who've done it. If they wanted to be paid desperately, I'm sure people would have found a way by now. And there was never really an outcry saying modders should be paid, modders should be paid. But then Valve sort of weighed in and try and impose their will and their suggestion on a system that's been running for 20 years just fine in its own form. And because they're so big and because they're so powerful, they do have the influence to change the industry that way.
That's the distribution platform, really.
But is it really their place to come in and say, we want this? Is it not our place as customers to say, we think we should have this? Or the modders to say, we're putting the work in, we should get this?
I mean, the thing that kind of stands out is that there is prominent modders who've made big mods for certain games where they've maybe got a Patreon account and they use Patreon and say you can donate to us, you can send us a few quid if you like what I'm doing, and it supports us.
As a consumer, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, totally. I mean, in that situation, because I haven't played a lot of mods, I haven't done it, but if I was playing mods on certain games and I was, I found that it would give us suddenly dozens of new hours of really good content for a game, I'd be inclined to say, well, I can slip you a $5 for that, quite happily. The flip side to it, though, and I think just to try and sort of play devil's advocate a bit, one potential idea or one potential positive that could come out of it is that if people had a big library of mods that were particularly talented, that didn't tie themselves into one particular game or one particular mod, potentially they could end up becoming a full-time modder, or that could be their break into the games industry.
Development.
Break into development. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm trying to paint it as like a particularly rosy picture. I mean, overall, I think there's more negative than good. Just over my personal opinion, not saying that's right or worth anything, but I think there's those opportunities there. I mean, again, just the only kind of mod group that I've kind of followed, or the only kind of modern community that I've followed, has been Total War, going back to sort of Medieval 2, some of the big Total Conversion mods that came out. Didn't really play much of them, but because I was invested in those communities, I was aware when those mods would weigh in on stuff, or when those mods were particularly active.
I used to play around with the Darth mods on the Total War games.
Darth fellow Geordie, he lived in the northeast, and he, I think originally, and this could just be complete rumour, but I can remember reading on a forum somewhere, he'd went for a job with CA, wasn't successful, and then that's when he stopped modding the game. And it's that idea.
I can't believe he wasn't successful, considering the vast improvements that he made in the game. Again, a lot of it was like largely sort of balancing, bug fixing.
It was him saying, "I like Empire, but I don't like X, Y, and Z," or "I think this should be the thing." and then he would do it. And
Darth Mod made my Empire Total War playable, because
Yeah.
I had issues with it.
Yeah.
Terrible AI issues that Darth Mod really sort of nailed down.
Yeah. And, as I said, I don't want to slander the guy, and I don't want to kind of gossip and what have you. That's just what I read on a forum somewhere, whether that's right or wrong. But you could imagine the point where, if he could be paid for those mods, would it bring somebody of that kind of talent back in to say, well, actually, that's something where it might not be able to make a livable career out of it, but might put some money in his pocket, might just incentivise the guy to sort of pick up the tools again,
That's fair enough. I'm not saying I'm against the idea in principle. I'm certainly against the way that it's been done.
Yeah.
The way that it was shoehorned in, it was definitely Valve's idea and not anybody else's idea. Yeah. It was their plan and they came out with it.
And it's interesting how it happens with Skyrim, which is probably the biggest example of a game where there's a huge variety of mods available in sort of common gaming parlance anyway. It seems to be the one that most people get quite familiar with modding about, and the Steam Workshop has always been kind of seen as kind of this is an additional feature, this is something that we'll add into a game that's being developed or a game that's being released on Steam, and it means that you can get quick, easy access to a lot of really cool content. Whereas now it's kind of you're thinking, you're basically opening a cash store in a game that I've already bought, and if that's the case, does Steam Workshop therefore become a bit of a negative thing? And is it if this game has Steam Workshop, does that mean you're going to release it and it's unfinished, or there's going to be bits missing, or you're going to push it out onto something that I've got to pay for in addition to what I've already paid?
People get pissed off enough about DLC culture and the fact that you spend nowadays when you buy a game, realistically that's not the end of your investment.
No.
Realistically, there's going to be a couple of DLC packs. There could be anything from a tiny little 50p content pack to a full £15 total game conversion.
Yeah.
And you're opening that door up even more with the mod scenes. Potentially, it could damage homegrown DLC.
Yeah.
But there's been a huge outcry from the Skyrim forum on Steam in particular, is where I've been looking. People have been banding together as a community, and they've been giving the game negative reviews.
There's a change petition going around as well. That's getting quite a few thousand.
It's done very well because earlier today, all the paid mods got withdrawn from Steam support on Skyrim. And what is very worth pointing out, I think, is that withdrawal decision was made by Bethesda. It was not made by Valve. Bethesda decided, based on the community feedback.
Fallout 4's on the horizon, other bits and pieces going on.
Yeah, well, they did a post about why we're introducing paid mods, and then earlier today, update to that post. I say earlier today, it's 28th of April, by the way, because we won't get this out on the day that we recorded. But earlier today, update, due to community feedback, we're pulling it for the time being.
Yeah.
So we'll see what comes of that, whether or not they're gonna relook at it and try and launch it again, or whether or not they've realised that it's not something the community want. Who knows? It's probably not the end of the saga.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of page one in a very long book, probably.
Well, like I say, it was Bethesda's decision, so who knows what Valve are doing. I imagine there's been a fair few roundtable conferences amongst some of Valve's staff.
Yeah, completely. No, it's a contentious one, and at the end of the day, I like to think that I've got a fairly balanced view on it, because probably I haven't got a huge investment in modern games that I'm playing for,
Well, I think I am investing in it, even though I don't, because, as I say, it's a fundamental part of what I consider to be PC gaming culture. And for good or ill, it may be a good idea, it may be a bad idea, but I resent the fact that sort of Steam and Valve
is dictating the terms here.
have took themselves as the arbiter and the voice of everybody involved. I haven't seen any evidence of any sort of consultations or anything like that. It was just very much, bam, paid mods, here you go.
No, I agree with that one. Yeah, there's definitely some issues to it. But, I mean, we've rambled about that for nearly 20 minutes. Should we move on to next topic here?
Okay, topic, what is that?
Next one is probably going to be one that you've got more to say about than me, but thought we'd have a bit of a discussion around Bloodborne and maybe a brief retrospective on the Dark Souls games. And the Souls games
I could talk about them all day. I love the Souls series of games.
You talk about them a lot to me, even though, just to throw my sort of hat in the ring here, I'm not a huge fan of them. I haven't played a huge amount of time. I haven't spent a huge amount of time on them. I find them more frustrating than enjoyable.
Well, Bloodborne's it's huge. I think I don't want to say it's popularised the series. I mean, Dark Souls 2 was very popular as well. It's still a very hardcore series of games, but it's certainly come a long way from Demon's Souls in terms of popularity. I knew the moment I saw the first Bloodborne trailer come on the TV that I was getting a PS4, and I went out and got a PS4 the next day, and I hunted around for the package that I wanted, which was Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. Not a popular package by all accounts. I had to go to various places before I finally managed to pick that particular deal up. And happy I have been with it.
Well, I've got Bloodborne. It came with the PS4 bundle that I bought. I got, I think, The Order and Bloodborne. But I mean, I made no bones about it. I bought my PS4 to play shitty sports games. which
I got mine to play Bloodborne.
Interestingly enough, WWE has now been announced on the friggin' PC as well. So there's like 400 quid pissed up the wall for something I could have quite happily done with on my PC, and probably looked better on my PC as well. But yeah, Bloodborne, I've maybe played an hour or two of it. I quite like it. I don't know what it is. I haven't been compelled to go back and cane it, which by my understanding is what people do with Dark Souls, you know.
To be fair, I've put it down. I've
kind of hardcore masochistic binge.
I've put it down for a little while. I'm going to go about maybe 12, 13 hours into it and put it aside.
I don't know what it is. I've got Dark Souls on the PC, which I picked up. It was on, I think, last Christmas's Steam sale. It came up and it was a £5. And I thought, you know what? Maybe now's the time I'll get into it. I think originally you maybe lent me a copy of Demon's Souls.
I had 2 copies of Demon's Souls in the end. I lent you a copy of Demon's Souls for the PlayStation 3.
And it just frustrated the piss out of us about half an hour in, just getting killed left, right and centre. And I couldn't quite work out why that was happening. Just these almost like kind of like beginner traps set up for you that would wipe us out. And it's like, right, well, you know what? When this used to happen on like NES games or you know, like Mega Drive games, you'd be like, that's just really bad design. I don't like that. I've stepped a few steps forward, you know. There was an angry video game nerd about, what the hell was it? Something like Spelunker or something like that. But this idea that you walk a few steps forward, you fall down a tunnel and you're dead. And it's like, well, I've just literally loaded the game up knowing very little about it. How was I supposed to know? And
no,
I'm not saying
that's right. That's unfair.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's right, and I certainly don't want to say those games are badly designed. Even if I'm not a fan of them, I'm not saying that's shitty design. But what I'm saying is, for me personally, in the way that I like to play, I'm not saying I like a game that holds my hand, but I like a game that at least gives us a kiss before it tries to shag us. I like a game that just like eases us in a little bit. You know, a little bit of a tutorial, or at least give us a run and start, like let us at least work out what's happening. Or if it's in a storytelling purpose, throws into something that's going to batter the shit out of us, but then it cuts back and then at the beginning. And you know, I think was it maybe Infamous? Did Infamous do that? Or no, Prototype.
It started you out,
started you,
powered,
you're like, yeah, of course, you're super powered, the world's gone to shit, you're blowing up tanks, and you're going, what the hell has gone on here? But then within a couple of minutes, that ends, and then it puts you back to the start and says, this is how this transpired.
It's interesting that you picked a fairly mediocre game to compare against what I think is a fantastic game.
Fantastic series. First one that came to mind, and that's the thing, I don't want to come across as a bad guy in saying that those games are bad, or people who like them are bad. Just personal opinion, like they don't sit well with me and my style and what I like to do.
I can appreciate definitely why those games are love it or hate it kind of games. It is a little bit of a nod to the old school in that it is very much about incremental performance. You die in one bit, but then you know a little bit more about that bit and you can get a little bit further next time, and then you die and then you get a little bit further again. Now in fairness, once you get the hang of the systems and you realise that you've got to play the game very carefully and very defensively, it is possible to get through a level with only a couple of goes. And once you learn the levels, and it really is about learning and memorising and knowing where every enemy is and every pitfall is.
I found that even the couple of hours that I played, once I knew where there was going to be a bad guy hidden, and I knew to expect that as I came around the corner.
I mean, you mentioned Dark Souls, the run up to the first boss in Dark Souls where you fight the Taurus demon.
Yeah.
It took me probably 2 or 3 hours to even get to the Taurus demon on my first run, and then I went back and replayed the game and I got to him in 5 minutes.
But what made you stick with it? What made you stick with it for those 3 hours?
I'll be perfectly honest with you, I found it frustrating as hell. But I played Demon's Souls and I knew that was just how it goes. I knew it was just the fact that there were a couple of little different systems that I had to get my head around, and it was all incremental performance. And it was all, do a little, rather than try and get through the level, do a little bit of the level and then go back and level up and repair your equipment and then start again and do a little bit more of the level and go back and level up. And it's that kind of slow performance, but really rewarding performance. So if you play a game and you breeze through the first level and you get the first boss and you kill the boss, it's like, well, that's the first level done. You're playing Dark Souls, you get through a level and you kill a boss and you go, yes! I fucking did it! I finally got that bastard! He's been bugging me for days! And I just love that. I think the crushing lows make those highs feel so much better, and it's a kind of elation that I used to get when I was a kid.
Yeah,
When I find that as I've grown up, I get less excited about games these days.
yeah, you don't get the heart pounding,
yeah,
you don't get
exactly.
the adrenaline running, thinking, shit, is this the
But
time I
like,
do it?
after it took me like 10 attempts to get to the boss and then 10 attempts to beat the boss, and yeah, it might have drove me nuts, and a couple of times I wanted to throw my controller out the window. But when I kill that cunt, that is the first use of the C word ever on the Gonzo Ewok channel.
Might have to bleep that one.
But when I kill that C word, my god, does it feel good. We're not even talking about Bloodborne, we're just talking about the series in general. I first got into it on a total whim, and before that I was never really a hardcore fan of hardcore games. I wasn't into roguelikes or anything like that was excessively difficult. I was in Granger Games one day. If you don't know them, if you're not from the northeast of England, Granger Games are a local firm from around the northeast of England. One thing they're really good for, which they don't advertise,
Imports.
they've always got import games in.
Yeah.
There's a couple of times I've been in there and bought a game, and it's turned out to be a game that's not even released in the UK.
I think I got Two Worlds 2 possibly.
Yeah.
As an import.
I fancied Two Worlds too. I ended up importing it from Canada.
Yeah.
Just so I get my
I picked
hands
it
on
up
it.
for like 17 quid in Granger Games down the
I
road.
paid like 20 quid equivalent for it, plus 10 quid postage to get it from Canada, and then I walked into Granger Games and it was there. I was like, for F's sake, they said it was. he says the C word and then he bleeps himself on F. Yeah, mate, I just paid loads of money for this because I was told it wasn't getting a UK store release.
Aye.
But yeah, I went in, I got Demon's Souls on a whim. I picked it up and it was talking about like the message system on the back of the box and the unique online co-op and PvP options, and I thought, yeah, this sounds really interesting. And it wasn't until I started playing it that I realised it wasn't released in the UK. At the time, it had no plans of being released in the UK.
Didn't you have to play it at like some weird times in order to find
in order to co-op with people, I had to play it at weird times because it was the US version I had. So, like during the day, UK time, everyone in the US was asleep. So I'd be like up at 2 o'clock in the morning, catching people who were just coming back from work. Like, absolutely fatigued, but desperate to get some help to do this next boss.
Well, I think for me, Bloodborne, going back to the original point, it looks good. The controls I really liked. What I was going to say when I picked up Dark Souls, what put us off was, for me, unplayable with a keyboard and mouse. Clearly.
Right.
And it says as much. It's not like that was anything dodgy.
Yeah, they didn't hide it. It said on the
it says like you can do it, but really it's
It
not
was From
worthwhile.
Software's first attempt to port a game to PC.
Yeah, and
I think they did all right.
Yeah, but even then, I found. I use a third party controller on my PC, and even then, I just found the controls were just really, really, just unpleasant. The game was hard enough without us having to fight the controls on top of everything else.
You see, I think that the controls are really precise and the actions are really precise, but a lot of it's about the timing. So you might think, oh, I'm pressing the button and it takes a couple of seconds to swing a sword, but that's part of the game and that's part of what you've got to learn. How the different weapons handle and how they're a bit sluggish, and you don't get that sort of instant gratification. You don't press the button and get the instant action. But I think what you were going to say is that that's pretty different on Bloodborne.
Yeah, Bloodborne, I'm finding actually, as you say, the controls in Bloodborne, to me, they feel fluid, they feel precise. If I want to do something, I can, and if it goes wrong, or I get, somebody gets the drop on us, I feel as though that was my fault. I don't feel as though that's like the game dicking us over. It's like, yeah, I could have reacted quicker, I could have done this, I could have dodged, I could have backed off. That's my bad. And don't get us wrong, I'm not a puss in terms of like, I like sort of casual games, or like easy games or games that hold my hand.
I know that. I mean, you like your
hardcore
roguelikes, you like your FTL and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Stuff that kills you every 5 minutes.
Zomboid, one of my favourite games of all time. You can't really say that gives you an easy hand of it, really, I like games that really try and beat the shit out of you, but I like at least give you a fair chance, And I think that was, for me, probably the difference, and one of the reasons why I haven't went back to Bloodborne since I picked it up, but I've been working really, really hard. I've been travelling all over the place for work.
And we've got other games on the go as well.
Yeah, there's other stuff going on. Kerbal's just
released.
Yeah, other stuff going on. GTA 5 came out, started playing that on the PC, picked that back up again before my monitor exploded, and I had to put up this ancient one instead. So all of that kind of happened, and then Bloodborne's kind of fallen by the side. But I know at some point I'll have a quiet weekend to myself. My missus might be out and about doing something. I might have like a boys' weekend where I'm just allowed to sit in my pants and play on the computer. Bloodborne's probably something in those circumstances I'd pick up.
I think possibly the difference between Bloodborne and the rest of the Souls games, I say the rest of the Souls games, it's not really a Souls game, that maybe you're liking a bit more about it, and when you look at it, it is distinctly Souls-like in its style. That a lot of the mechanics are the same. Instead of collecting souls, you're collecting blood, you get your stains. The online mechanics have been tweaked a bit, but it's still largely the same. Summon signs, getting people into your game. And I would definitely recommend you do as much online co-op as you can, because that's definitely one way to make progress through the game. But the big change, it's a relatively small change, but it changes the way the whole game operates, is that it's taken away the defense element. The Souls games were all about making very slow progress, walking forward with your shield up just in case anything attacked you, playing on the defensive, trying desperately not to get hit. And Bloodborne flips that. It takes your shield away for a start. There is a shield, but it's crap. And when you get hit, if you hit people back quickly, you get some of your health back. And it turns it from being a very defensive game into a very offensive game, where you're rewarded for attacking and you're rewarded for making the first move and not hanging back. And I think in many ways that makes it a more active experience than passive experience, if you know what I mean by
totally.
that.
Well,
you're not reacting, you're acting.
I'm somebody that grew up spending an unhealthy amount of time playing Streets of Rage, so that kind of makes sense, really. It's a case of get in there and hit them. Get in there and hit them hard.
And it rewards that aggressive play. It took me a lot of time to get used to. I struggled on maybe the first level on Bloodborne, just because I was trying to hang back, get people to come to me and do it that way, but I realised quite early on that you've got to be careful, and you've got to have your split time.
And
you don't want to take. You've got to plan it out. You don't want to take up too much, but at the same time, when stuff starts happening, you just got to get in there, and you've got to get your timings, get your swings right, and fight. Not back off. Raise your shield.
One of the first big encounters you have, there's maybe like 12 guys hanging around watching like a burning pyre. And it's like, right, okay, then I'll throw a Molotov. I don't like those particular kinds of enemies, so he's getting a Molotov in the face, and that'll take out one or two of his mates. And then, as you said, charge in before they react and hit them. And I quite like that. I do like that sort of sense of aggression, and you getting stuck in there, wiping them out and taking care of them.
I love when you're killing people and your guys getting splattered with the gore. It's very, very visceral, very visual.
Have you ever seen what happens if you're maybe wearing like a wide-brimmed hat and then you remove the hat? And you've just got like a perfect white line across your
forehead. No, I haven't noticed that.
The blood will
being the classic Victorian gent, my guy always wears a top hat, so he's never taken that off. I'll have to try that next time.
Take his top hat off when he's drenched, and he'll have like a little white sort of like tan line across the top of his head and his hair.
You should definitely get in there with co-op. What I tend to do when I'm playing is I'll get to a new level and I'll put my sign down, and then I'll help people clear that level, and I'll follow them around, and I'll help them take on the bad guys, and by doing that I'll learn the layout of the level, and then we'll get to the boss and we'll take the boss out, and then I'll go back to the beginning, I'll put my summon sign down again. I'll do that 3 or 4 times, get through the level. You get loads of blood to level up a couple of times, and then when you're ready, when you think you know the level, you know all the nooks and crannies, then you pick up other people's summon signs and they come through the level with you. For me, it is a very co-op experience.
It's maybe one of the things that I find like a bit of a strange one, because really I'm not much of a one for like online co-op or even like online play generally.
Me neither, and I can tell you why I like it. I'm not particularly comfortable talking with some of the people that you get matched up with. Sometimes you get matched up with an annoying little whiny kid, or sometimes you get matched up with some like hardcore
massive racist.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say some like hardcore douchebag who wants to give you grief because you don't do things exactly the way that he does, or if you die you get abuse or whatever like that. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but it happens. But Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, it's completely silent. You don't talk to each other, you just follow each other around, and it's fine. I like that. It's co-op, but it's also a sense of anonymity. You might as well be playing with an NPC, but you can get in there and you can help someone. And the little use of the gestures and stuff. I think that's like really cool. At the end, everyone waves at each other and bows to each other. And I think that almost adds an element of sort of humorous communication. When you're trying to get a message across, you're pointing frantically at something, and the guy's shrugging and whoa, I don't know what you're on about. Point, shrug. It's great.
Aye. Oh well, I think it is. It's something I'll probably go back to at some point. I think I've sort of gleaned a little bit of the enthusiasm here. I think you've instilled a little bit of that into us. It's maybe worth giving another go.
You should come and watch me play it something. Show you how a pro plays.
Silence.
Right, what's next?
Alright, last one I want to pick up. I don't know how long we'll talk about it because I mean it's I'm not sure exactly how much either of we've got to say on it. Me maybe slightly more than you, but stuff going on with Konami.
Right, yeah.
Konami, obviously, two of the big games that they've been working on recently, Metal Gear Solid 5, off the back of Ground Zeroes, the paid-for tech demo that came out.
That came for 30-minute tech demo.
Yeah, which, incidentally, I enjoyed. I'm a sucker for Metal Gear, though. It's one of my favourite series of all time.
I despise it.
I know, and we'll get to that. Yeah, that'll make a good argument in a couple of minutes. Other big one, of course, was Silent Hills, with Norman Reedus, Guillermo del Toro, and Hideo Kojima, obviously working on both of them as well, in a production capacity. I didn't play it myself. Saw a few people play the demo that was put out again, a little 30-minute kind of like teaser. Looked really, really interesting. And again, Silent Hills has been a bit of a mix. Silent Hill as a series has been a bit of a mixed bag, but the first two, in particular, were outstanding. They scared the shit out of us as a kid. I loved them. And then, of course, Hideo Kojima announced a few weeks ago that he was walking away from Konami, either walking away or possibly pushed.
He said he was walking away, and then there was somebody from inside Konami or some sort of PR person or something tweeted that they confirmed that he was actually sacked, and then Konami turned around and said, no, he definitely wasn't sacked, that's not the case. And,
yeah.
So I mean, you never really know with these things.
Bit smoke and mirrors, and of course... So
whether he was sacked or whether he left, I mean, either way, it doesn't bode well for his opinions of the company.
By my understanding, Kojima didn't want to work on Metal Gear Solid 4 either, though. He was kind of brought back in to do it. He wanted to do other things. He wasn't keen on doing it and wanted to kind of leave it where he left it.
But arguably, his name is bigger than the name Konami.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of his work that he's done, absolutely outstanding, you know. But of course then, so Metal Gear Solid 5 continues without him. And then it's to the point of, well, how much has went into the game already that he's had input on? Is he leaving because there's things that are going to be going on within the game that he doesn't like, and that's maybe where this argument's come from. Nobody knows what's actually happened apart from Konami and Kojima at this point. Then yesterday, which was the 27th, news comes out that Silent Hills has been cancelled. It had been fated over the weekend. People had been saying they were hearing rumblings to say that it was going to be cancelled, but then the official statement came out yesterday to say that's scrubbed entirely. Yep,
the demo is being pulled from I think it was on the PlayStation Store, the demo was being pulled. At the time of recording, you can still get it. Who knows if you will be able to in 2 days' time when we put this live. It's worth a check if you want to.
After we're done with the podcast, I'll go and see
it's worth a check, people, if you want to go and download it. I haven't played it myself, but I've heard that it's really interesting and whet a lot of people's appetite for it.
And then the news also then broke maybe an hour or two later that apparently Konami have delisted themselves from the New York Stock Exchange. So again, rumblings. Now, in terms of, it sounds really, really drastic, the idea of, well, they've
again, this is the kind of thing that we could record and release in 2 days, and it's completely obsolete.
All we can go off is what we're talking about now.
In the event that it is completely obsolete at this point, we've been gone to an Ewok. Subscribe if you like our channel. You can view us on Facebook and Twitter.
No, people should hang on because we're going to have a great argument about Metal Gear in a few minutes.
That's the point. We're going to have an argument apparently about
Metal Gear. Hang fire if you want to hear that. You might want to skip ahead a few minutes if this all turns out to be bollocks. What I was going to say though is that Konami delisting themselves from the New York Stock Exchange. They put in what you call like a File 25, which basically means that they're going to delist themselves. However, some of their financial interests are going to remain, and this is going to be you've got to give 90 days notice. So come July, this will come into effect. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not trading in America anymore, or that they're not going to be like a corporate entity in America. But it is a bit of a strange manoeuvre, because it means that basically they are kind of taking their shares off.
It's certainly not a good sign when you remove your public listing.
When Kojima disappears, you cancel a hugely anticipated game, and then all of a sudden you announce at the stock exchange you're pulling out. It's. I don't know. It'll be an interesting one to see what develops from that. And let's be honest, Konami are a hugely influential game maker, game publishing house.
I mean, God, how long have they've been around since the beginning almost?
Yeah, well,
Konami's always been a name that I've known.
Yeah, back in the NES days. I mean, you look at things like Contra was them.
You say Contra, was it not Probotector in this country?
Was, yeah, but I watch a lot of American YouTubers where it's referred to often as Contra.
It's referred to as Contra all over the internet.
Yeah,
I think more people, even in the UK, probably know it as Contra as they do Probotector, unless they're as old as we are.
I'm trying to think of sort of popular Konami games when I was playing with my Mega Drive when I was a young kid. Sunset Riders. We played that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Really enjoyed that. They've had a slew of really, really sort of big, important games, if games can be important. But very influential games, are very well-established games. Mm-hmm. More recently, the Silent Hill series, and of course then Metal Gear as well.
And they've been around since the PlayStation 1 era, both of those.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Metal Gear 1 was PlayStation?
PlayStation 1,
yeah. And Silent Hill was PlayStation 2. It was PlayStation 1, 2, as well as Poor choice of words there.
But so Metal Gear, you're not a fan.
No, I hate it. It's shite.
Do you want to maybe elaborate for the purposes of a podcast as to why it's shite?
Well, basically, it's a stealth game.
Yep.
And all stealth games are shite.
Right. So is that just opinion stated as fact, and all stealth games are shite?
Well, I don't know. It's perhaps a strange one, because you were talking about sort of the Souls series. We were talking about the Souls series, and there was a basic acknowledgement that you have to be very patient to get away with the Souls series, because you have to spend your time learning the levels and getting used to constant setbacks. But stealth games I hate because you have to be patient. Well, I don't have the patience to sit there and wait for 5 minutes until all the guards' backs are turned, and then go out and get caught, and then have to do the whole fucking thing over again.
It's an interesting one about Metal Gear, and I understand where you're coming from, because really what we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s was shooter games that put these enforced stealth sections into games, where you would get that kind of like one-hit kill, like if you're caught or you're spotted, you're finished.
And that's the point that I end up turning the console off.
But that's the thing, with Metal Gear you don't have that. With Metal Gear, if you're caught, shit hits the fan, but you can fight your way out of it.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I certainly couldn't back in those days.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, you're rewarded for stealth, you're rewarded for not being seen, you're rewarded for not having a horrendous body count. But if you want to go into that game and load it up and just pick up a rifle and just gun your way through it, you can play it like that.
But if I wanted to play a game where I just pick up a rifle and gun my way through it, I'd be playing a different game that does that element of it better. I find it hard to criticise, because this is purely a personal thing. I hate stealth games, I really do. The Last of Us, one of the finest games of the last generation, lauded by critics, loved by people.
I couldn't get away with it, mate. I thought it was alright.
I did my tits in. I played like a couple of hours of it, and then I got stuck in this room where there were a couple of little bastards, I feel they're called clickers. There were a couple of clickers walking around, and I went in and I sat there for 5 minutes. And I was like, right, finally, I've got a break. And I went and I killed one of them, and another one spotted me. And then, right, okay, now I'm going to have to go back to where I was, hide behind this box for another 5 minutes, waiting to make my move. And my idea of a game is playing a game, not sitting and watching the game and waiting for the time where it is the right time to then play the game.
I think with Metal Gear you could certainly level that kind of abuse. That's the wrong thing from your blinds. You'll pull them off and kill wall.
You looked like you were getting blinded there, so I thought I'd pull the blinds down.
With Metal Gear, certainly you could say, look, there's a horrendous amount of cutscenes in it. But that being said, the story, even though I get it's pretentious, it's purposely obtuse, it's purposely ambiguous, is really, really good. The themes that kind of underlie it are fantastic.
I finished the first Metal Gear. I did. I've almost forgotten that I'd finished it, but I did. I vaguely remember finishing it, because there was the Metal Gear at the end, this big sort of mech thing. But I finished it because those were the days when I didn't have many games.
If I had, you will damn well enjoy it.
If I had another game, I would have moved on to it. And since then, I played it and I finished it, and then Metal Gear 2 comes out, and I'm like, well, no, I didn't really enjoy the first one, and I've never went back to it. Maybe it's completely different now.
The game's changed a lot. If you look at, and for the record, I only played the original Metal Gear's 8-bit ones on a NES emulator, because I'd never had a NES when I was a kid. First time I ever got my hands on a NES, one of my friends
so it does
had one.
predate PlayStation.
Yeah, it was originally 8-bit.
The one that I played was the first PlayStation one. Was it Metal Gear Solid?
Metal Gear Solid, yeah. Which is what really kind of got me into it. Later on, I got my hands on a NES emulator and played through the sort of the original 8-bit one. But yeah, like Metal Gear Solid, I like Kojima's touch in it, coming back to the point that we're making. I like the touch, that kind of postmodern view to it. It takes you outside the game at one point. You're told that you need to contact somebody in your codec, and it's kind of like a sort of like an anti-piracy measure where you've got the codec thing that you need printed on the box. You get
God, I remember those things.
You get like weird, but it's very self-aware that that's what's happening. So it's super cinematic and super immersive, but at the same time, it'll just click its fingers and it's like you're playing a fucking game. And it'll snap you back out of it and then take you back in over the next hour or so, and then it can snap you back out. Weird shit can happen. And that, for me, as a kid, was really, really exciting. That, like, it was like the PlayStation, or it was like the characters were then talking to me rather than to Snake. And I thought that was really, really interesting stuff. So it really kind of grabbed me attention. The games did change over time, though. Once you moved to, like, Metal Gear 3, which was Snake Eater, you moved to Metal Gear 4, it becomes more action orientated. As the graphics improved, as the things that they can do with the engine improved as well, it becomes a bit more kind of like action oriented, which you might find sits more comfortably with you on account of you can actually get into a bit of a shooting war with people, you know. So I mean,
possibly, I'm almost losing my love for shooters these days as well. To be honest with you, but I'm all about the indie these days.
Well, I mean, it's worth going back. I mean, in the last Metal Gear, Metal Gear 4, there's at one point it sends you back to Shadow Moses, which is where you're fighting on the original Metal Gear Solid. And it puts you into the old 2D graphics, and it's like Snake's reminiscent, but it suddenly looks a bit like the PlayStation. And then it snaps you back out, and you see actually the place is sort of crumbling. And you can read into that, and it's like Kojima's thought process is about getting old and passing stuff on to the next generation, and you know, that kind of entropy over time. There's a lot you can read into it, and a lot that's kind of going on. Even if you're not somebody that's got the many hours needed to sit there and play through the games, and you know, anybody who's at home listening to this, or even reading up some of the wikis and looking at kind of, even if it didn't always achieve it, what Kojima wanted to do with the games is really, really fucking exciting, ambitious stuff. And it's one of those ones that, yeah, the games don't get us wrong. I'm not saying like the games, the way that they play is like a beautiful game. Sometimes the controls, sometimes the engine, sometimes the gameplay is annoying. But it's the same reason people would play Final Fantasy. Not amazing gameplay by any stretch of the imagination, but the story, the themes, what's going on sucks you into it enough. You know, who are you to criticise, really? Last one that we should pick up on, though, is a bit of a side note. What about Silent Hill?
I'm a little bit different towards Silent Hill in that I've played Silent Hill and enjoyed it. I didn't play Silent Hill 2, which many people say is like the peak.
Yeah.
I played Silent Hill 1 and loved it. I actually played it through several times to get different endings, including the crazy ass alien ending, which was a little bit abrupt. Loved it, really did. Absolute brown trousers stuff.
Yeah.
That bit in the school, in particular, really stands out to me, where you're exploring the school and you go. I think you go into the clock, don't you? You go in the clock tower
underneath,
and you come out, and it's the first time you're in sort of the sort of shadow hell world sort of thing. And I mean, looking back at it, it's quite funny that I found that scary because graphics are so dated.
Yeah, but it's still unnerving. It's the use of sound. It's just the atmosphere it creates.
It really got in me.
Well, as you well know, I'm a little bit afraid around windmills. Wind turbines in particular. Not so much the old timey ones, but the new windmills, like a wind turbine, I'm a little bit afraid of. Totally agree with their use. This isn't some sort of like underhanded way of saying I disagree with renewable energy or deny climate change, but I find them a bit creepy. They're a bit ominous. And there's two things that I put it down to. One, when I was a kid, we went on a tour of Scotland with my mum and dad, and I fell asleep in the back of the car. I woke up on the outskirts of Stirling, and they had a huge wind farm. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, sort of like very early dawn. Sun wasn't really up. and I woke up in the back of the car, and all you could hear was just this whomp, 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 whomp. And it was like 500 wind turbines going off, nothing else going on. Shit a brick then, that freaked us out.
Does this come back to Silent Hill at some
Yes.
point?
The second point is Silent Hill. In quite a few parts of Silent Hill, when you go into the kind of that hell world, you see wind turbines in the background. They're maybe not properly modelled, or if you remember on the PS1, the view distance was terrible. And
Well, the fog that they put in was to sort of mask the view distance,
Yeah.
but it also made it really
super
terrifying and
claustrophobic.
immersive.
And sometimes through that fog you would see the shadow, or you'd see the slight movement of this wind turbine, or you'd see some behind, like, you know, that kind of like sort of wrought iron kind of fence or something spattered with blood and rust. You'd see one in there moving. And those two incidents are what kind of freaked us out about wind turbines as they are, you see. But what I was going to say is, I mean, it had a big impact on us as a kid. I loved Silent Hill, Silent Hill 1 and 2. Played 3, bit of a departure, but again, it was still really good fun.
I played a bit of Silent Hill The Room.
Aye, that's where I kind of started losing it a bit.
Yeah, I didn't get all the way through that. I kind of lost patience with that.
Yeah.
I picked it up very much on impulse, saw it in the shop, and I remembered Silent Hill, and I thought
It
Silent
was
Hill was amazing.
PS3, I think, was it?
I think it was PS2 actually.
PS2.
It could have been either. I seem to remember playing it at university, and I don't think I had the PS3 at university. So I think it might have been PS2.
But yeah, I mean, I can remember seeing it and thinking, oh, that's quite interesting. And then it dawned on us that I hadn't really seen it advertised. Nobody was talking about it like they were with 1 and 2. But I picked it up, and 3 to some extent. But I picked it up and played it, and it didn't quite sit right with us. I could see what they were like, trying to do and trying to take it in a slightly different direction. But the story wasn't quite as interesting. That didn't grab us, and it wasn't quite the same. They released not specifically the same sort of developer, but a couple of Silent Hill sort of spin-off games were made as well, which were sort of universally canned.
It was a movie.
Yeah,
Did it not have
couple of movies, I think.
Scene Born in it? Did it?
Scene Bean. Yeah,
No, it's Scene Born, isn't it?
Son Born. It's
Sean
Son Born or Scene Bean.
Yeah.
But
That fella from Yorkshire who got his head cut off.
Yeah.
In, spoiler alert, Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. A couple of movies. But in any event, I think that the point being that
The point being that
interesting.
Regardless
Coming
of the
back to-
highs and the lows of the previous franchise, they brought out a demo, a little tech demo. People loved it. It got a really good reception.
Looked really, really good. Looked
Looked
interesting.
pretty. Star name attached to it.
Aye, Norman Reedus, Daryl from
The Walking Dead, yeah. And then for them to announce that that's not happening, they said they will be taking the Silent Hill franchise forward, but it won't be with, what's his name, Norman Reedus?
Aye.
Won't be with Norman Reedus. They've said that basically their license and contractual agreement with him has now expired, which makes you wonder, have they actually done any work with him? Has he done any voice work? Has he done any motion cap?
Aye.
Is it all getting thrown out now? Did they not even get to the point where they started that? And if so, why? If they had a contract with him that ran to a certain point in time, they'd got to the point where they put a demo, or more of a sort of teaser. They put a teaser of the game up. They publicised pictures of him in sort of digitised character. They really sort of relied on that star name. Yet they've gotten to this point and they say the contract's expired. Did they not give it enough time to even start the game?
That's not a very long contract, is
It
it?
certainly doesn't look like it's gone according to plan.
Yeah.
And that and Kojima leaving, it does raise shadows over the company.
Personally, I mean, it's a strange one. It's going to be two big losses. I played Ground Zeroes for Metal Gear, and yeah, it was a tech demo. Paid for it, quite short. But you know what? I quite liked what was going on with that engine. I thought there was a lot they could have done with that. Metal Gear Solid without Kojima, I want to know how much he's had an active hand in it, because it's his story and it's his themes that really drive it for me. It's what sets it apart. The gameplay,
It's going to be like Batman Arkham Origins all over again when it's handed over to a different. It's not even a different developer, but Kojima's obviously
it's a substantial change.
He's a big character with a big influence. So without his influence, it could be something very different.
If a lot of that kind of influence that he would bring to it is then lost, if that's not already stamped on the game clearly, I would have some reservations about it.
Could it even be the case that there's an awkward contrast between
you can see the bits that he's done and the bits that are
the
just
bits
kind
that
of
he's had his
filled
input in and the bits that have been added after?
Which, I mean, it'll, that would be a bit of a car crash, really.
Well, it's make or break for Konami. We'll see whether they're still here.
I hope they hang around.
I
I hope that we're just reading into things a little bit more negatively than maybe they are going. Maybe there's a completely rational explanation for what they're doing. Maybe they can pull something out of the bag. I'd like to, because when those guys are on top form and firing out good games, they do produce some very, very good games, and I'd like to see that continue.
I think that's a good point to leave it, buddy.
I think
well
so.
said.
Aye. Oh well, if you've enjoyed the podcast, it's not really a pilot anymore because it's the second one. The first one was quite well received, and we really appreciate your support on that one.
If you haven't watched it, go back. It's still all relevant stuff. We've got
Yeah.
GTA 5, Mortal Kombat 10. What else did we talk about?
Other stuff.
Star Wars Battlefront. Oh yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
Big fans.
And what I would say is, if you've enjoyed this one, again, if you want to show a bit of support, you can drop a like. Would love to hear your comments about any of the stuff that we've talked about. Do you think that we're talking shite? Do you agree? What's your thoughts? Would like to hear you, and leave them in the comments below.
Absolutely.
If you haven't already, please subscribe. And have you got any closing remarks, Ewok?
Well, things are going to change in the next couple of weeks. The things that we've talked about, the paid mod support being withdrawn from Steam,
Yeah.
Konami. This isn't the end of the story, and if you want to continue the discussion, we're happy to. Drop a comment on Facebook, on YouTube, and we'll respond.
Yeah, we'll respond. We've got a nice community as well. I'm sure people will throw in their 2 cents. Keep it civil, obviously, but I'm sure everybody will anyway. We'll keep only lovely people around with. We'll see you in the next podcast. Thanks very much for listening, and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.